The lights in the ICU buzzed overhead, soft, sterile, and far too white. It was the kind of brightness that erased the world outside. The kind of brightness that meant something had gone terribly wrong. Rebecca Parker stood just outside the glass partition, her eyes wide and dry, but her hands trembling so hard the nurse had to gently guide her back from the door. Her son, Ethan, just 12, lay motionless on the hospital bed, his small frame overwhelmed by wires, tubes, and machines that beeped and pulsed with life he could no longer provide on his own. Dr. Julia Hawk didn't sugarcoat things. She never had, not in 20 years of emergency medicine. "If we don't act immediately," she said, looking Rebecca square in the eye, "we're going to lose him tonight." Rebecca stared at her. The words echoed but didn't sink in. Lose him? She turned back to the window. Ethan's chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the ventilator. There was something deeply wrong about seeing a machine do your child's breathing for him. Only 2 days ago, he had been running down the hallway chasing the dog, laughing. Only 2 days ago, she had told him, "Get to bed, no more screen time," without so much as a glance at the little red bump on his chin. How could this be happening? Inside the room, 2 nurses moved quickly, checking IV lines, adjusting the sedation. A third nurse was calling out vitals. Rebecca tried to understand the numbers, but they may as well have been in a foreign language. She couldn't see her son's face clearly through the oxygen mask and all the tape, but she could see the bandage across his chin. That damn pimple, that stupid little thing. A memory flashed in her mind. Just 4 nights ago, Ethan had stood in front of the bathroom mirror with a towel wrapped around his waist. "Do I look gross?" he'd asked. She had barely looked up from her phone. "What are you talking about?" "This," he said, pointing to his chin. "It looks like a volcano." She remembered, laughing. "It's called puberty, buddy. You'll survive." That had been the last normal conversation they had. A soft knock on the glass startled her. Dr. Hawk was holding up a clipboard, nodding toward the hallway. Rebecca followed her numbly, her feet moving without will. They stood outside the staff entrance to the ICU. Hawk's face was firm but compassionate. "Your son is suffering from what we believe is septic shock," she said. Rebecca blinked. "Septic? Like an infection?" "Yes. A very aggressive one. The infection entered through the skin, likely through an open wound or something he picked at. It spread rapidly through his bloodstream. His immune system is in overdrive, attacking his organs instead of fighting the bacteria. I don't understand. It was just a pimple, I know, but the face is full of tiny blood vessels that drain into areas close to the brain. When that skin barrier is broken and bacteria find their way in, it can happen fast, especially with staph bacteria. The body can go into systemic shock in a matter of hours." Rebecca felt as if the floor were shifting under her, but he was just tired. "He had a fever. That's all. His blood pressure is dangerously low. He's not responding to the initial round of antibiotics. We've started a second line of treatment, broad-spectrum antibiotics, fluids, vasopressors, to stabilize his heart. He's on a ventilator to support his lungs. Is he going to die?" Dr. Hawk looked down for a moment, then back up, her voice low. "We don't know yet, but we're doing everything we can." Rebecca leaned against the wall, her knees buckled slightly. She let herself slide down until she was sitting on the cold tile floor, her arms wrapped around her chest as if trying to hold herself together. "I just thought it was a zit," she whispered. Dr. Hawk crouched down beside her, not touching, just sitting near enough to be felt. "You'd be surprised how many people think the same. But this isn't your fault. Kids pick at things. They don't tell us when they feel sick. We miss signs. We all do." Rebecca didn't answer. Her throat was tight with something far beyond grief. It was shame, guilt, dread. Behind the glass, the machines kept humming. Time, it seemed, had slowed to a heartbeat and a breath. A manufactured breath. One that didn't belong to Ethan anymore. And then, she remembered something else. A day before he collapsed, he had asked her a question that now rang like an alarm bell in her ears. "If something bad happened to me, would you even notice?" She'd laughed. "Of course I'd notice. Don't be dramatic." But maybe she hadn't. Not really. Not until now. The mirror in the upstairs bathroom was too high for Ethan to see his whole face unless he stood on his tiptoes. He did it anyway, every morning and night, like a quiet ritual. Today, the lighting caught the bump on his chin just right, making it seem 3 times bigger than it was. He leaned in close, fingers touching his skin lightly. Red, swollen, angry looking, just like Jake said. "You've got Mount St. Pimple going on." Jake had laughed at recess, the other boys snickering nearby. Ethan had shrugged it off with a fake smile, but it stung more than he wanted to admit. He had always been small for his age, a little too soft-spoken, a little too delicate. And now puberty was ambushing his face, right in the middle of 6th grade, when kids could be cruelest. He splashed water on his skin and stared at his reflection again. His brown eyes, usually bright, looked tired. He hadn't been sleeping well, not since the fights between his mom and dad had become more frequent. Though his dad had moved out 6 months ago, the echo of slammed doors and sharp words still lingered in the walls. Rebecca was trying, he knew that. She worked long hours at the clinic, came home exhausted, and still managed to ask about homework and make mac and cheese most nights. But lately, even her smiles felt forced, like they were stitched onto her face to hide how frayed everything had become. Last night, when he mentioned the pimple, she had barely looked up from her phone. "You'll survive," she said. Ethan hadn't pushed. What was the point? Now, standing in the bathroom, his fingers itched to do something. He knew he shouldn't. He remembered reading online that popping pimples could make them worse. But this thing wasn't going away. It throbbed. It mocked him. And most of all, it felt like a target painted right on his chin. He pressed, a sharp sting, then a small burst of fluid, followed by a spot of blood. He winced but didn't stop. He pressed harder, angling his fingers just right. It hurt, more than it should have. But when he was done, the bump looked flatter. Redder, yes, but less noticeable, he told himself. A victory. He washed his hands, dabbed at the spot with tissue, and tried not to flinch when it stung. Then he looked back at the mirror and whispered, "Better." Downstairs, the house was quiet. It always was on school mornings. Rebecca had already left for her early shift. She usually kissed his head on her way out, but today he'd woken up late. She'd left a note on the counter, eggs in the fridge. "Don't forget your science project." Ethan made himself toast and packed his backpack. He moved slowly, still feeling the dull ache in his chin. His head hurt a little too, and his legs felt heavier than usual, but he chalked it up to a bad night's sleep. The school bus came, and he climbed aboard, headphones in, eyes down. At school, the day passed in a blur. Math quizzes, lunchroom noise, more comments about his face volcano. He laughed them off again, but each joke landed like a paper cut on his confidence. By the time he got home, the spot on his chin was hot to the touch. He told himself it was fine, just healing, no big deal. That evening, Rebecca came home late, her scrubs wrinkled, hair pulled into a loose bun. She smelled like antiseptic and tiredness. "Hey kiddo," she said, kissing his forehead absent-mindedly. "How was school?" "Okay," he mumbled. She grabbed leftovers from the fridge, microwaved them, and ate while checking emails. Ethan sat across from her at the table, watching her face flicker in the glow of her phone screen. "Mom? Do I look weird?" She glanced up briefly. "What? No, why?" "Just wondering." He wanted to tell her about Jake, about how he felt weird lately, about how his body was changing and his brain felt like it was on overdrive, and how sometimes it was hard to breathe in crowded hallways. But she was already looking back at her phone, so he didn't say anything else. That night, in bed, the ache in his chin pulsed like a tiny drumbeat. His head hurt more. He felt flushed. Still, he didn't call for her. Instead, he rolled onto his side and whispered into the dark, "If something bad happened to me, would you even notice?" The morning light spilled through the blinds, soft and golden, but it did little to comfort Ethan as he sat on the edge of his bed, swaying slightly. His body felt heavy, like someone had laid a damp quilt over his limbs and pressed down. He had slept restlessly, tossing and turning, and when he finally opened his eyes, his sheets were tangled and soaked with sweat. He rubbed his eyes, his head throbbed, his mouth was dry, and the pimple, now scabbed and red, was surrounded by a growing patch of swollen, tender skin that radiated heat. Still, he got dressed, slowly. His hoodie felt too warm against his skin, but the air felt cold on his arms. He shivered despite it being August. Downstairs, Rebecca had already left, another early shift. There was a note on the table again, this time shorter. "Take your vitamins, have a good day. Love, Mom." He grabbed a banana and headed for the bus stop, moving like he was underwater. The sunlight felt too bright. The sounds of birds, of sprinklers running on lawns, seemed distant and muffled. At school, the fluorescent lights buzzed cruelly in the hallways. The day dragged. By second period, he could barely keep his eyes open. By third, he had stopped trying to answer questions. By lunch, he didn't even eat. The burger on his tray sat untouched, the smell turning his stomach. Jake sat across from him. "You okay, dude? You look like death warmed over." Ethan tried to smile but only managed a weak shrug. Mr. Whitman, his homeroom teacher, noticed too. During English, he walked past Ethan's desk and paused. "Ethan?" he said gently. Ethan looked up, dazed. "Yeah? You're pale. Do you want to go to the nurse?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "I'm fine. Just tired." But he wasn't fine. He wasn't anything close to fine. His fingers were trembling. His skin had taken on a grayish tone, and when the final bell rang, he almost stumbled getting out of his chair. On the bus ride home, he leaned against the window, cheek pressed to the glass. The coolness soothed him for a moment, but his eyelids drooped, and by the time the bus pulled up to his stop, the driver had to call his name twice. He wobbled down the steps and walked the half-block home in a daze. Inside the house, he dropped his backpack in the hallway, kicked off his shoes, and went straight to the couch. He pulled a blanket over himself and closed his eyes. An hour later, Rebecca came home to find him asleep there, still fully dressed. "Ethan?" she said softly, brushing hair from his forehead. Her hand recoiled. He was burning up. She crouched beside him, pressing the back of her hand to his cheek again, then his neck. The heat was undeniable. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "Can you wake up for me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Mom, what's going on? You're burning up. I don't feel good." She helped him sit up. He was lethargic, his arms limp as she pulled the blanket away. His hoodie was damp with sweat. His breathing was shallow. "I should have known," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Why didn't you say something this morning? You weren't home." Her heart clenched. Okay, we're gonna check your temperature, all right?" It read 103.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Rebecca reached for her phone. Her fingers fumbled the buttons. Should she call the pediatrician? Urgent care? No. Start simple. She gave him Tylenol, brought cool washcloths, sat beside him on the couch and held his hand. His skin was clammy. He kept drifting in and out of sleep. By dinner, the fever had dropped slightly, to 102.3 degrees Fahrenheit, but he still hadn't eaten. She made him sip water, spoon-fed him some broth. His voice was barely audible when he spoke. "My head hurts. I know, baby. And my chin. It burns." She pulled the blanket back and examined the spot. What had been a small pimple now looked like an angry wound. The skin around it was flushed and puffy, forming a hard knot beneath the surface. A thin red line ran down toward his neck. Her stomach dropped. She was a nurse. She had seen cellulitis before, blood poisoning. The word sepsis whispered in the back of her mind. But this was Ethan. Her Ethan. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was just an infection, a topical thing. He needed rest. Fluids. Antibiotics, maybe. She told herself that as she helped him into bed. She told herself that as she changed into pajamas. She told herself that as she lay awake into the early morning hours, listening to his breathing through the baby monitor she hadn't used in years. But deep down, something gnawed at her, a quiet, persistent dread she couldn't explain. At 2:37 a.m., Ethan let out a soft moan. She was at his bedside in seconds. He was curled into himself, eyes shut tight, his face drenched in sweat. "Mom," he whimpered, "I feel weird." "Where does it hurt, baby?" "Everywhere." That was the moment. The precise second Rebecca Parker understood this wasn't just a fever. This was something else. The waiting room at urgent care smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Rebecca sat in one of the plastic chairs. Ethan slumped against her shoulder, limp and half awake. It was Saturday morning, and the clinic was crowded. Children coughing, parents scrolling through phones, a toddler crying somewhere near the entrance. Ethan hadn't spoken much since they left the house. He winced when he walked, and his skin was flushed with a strange mottled hue. She kept her arm around him, afraid that if she let go, he might just fall sideways. A nurse finally called his name. Rebecca guided him back to the examination room, her heart pounding. She had run through all the possibilities: strep, flu, some kind of viral infection. But the red line on his neck haunted her. It was darker now, creeping toward his collarbone like an ominous thread. Inside the room, the physician assistant was young, early 30s at most. He wore sneakers and had a calm, breezy tone. "Looks like someone's had a rough couple of days, huh?" he said as he reviewed Ethan's chart. Rebecca gave a tight smile. "Fever of 103 FF, no appetite, fatigue, and this." She gently turned Ethan's face toward him. "It started as a pimple." The PA leaned in, examining the swollen, angry mass at the center of Ethan's chin. He whistled softly. "That's one nasty little bugger. Probably got infected when he picked at it. Pretty common at his age." "Have you seen the redness going down his neck?" she asked. unable to hide the tension in her voice. Yeah, that's a sign the infection is spreading a bit under the skin. Looks like localized cellulitis. Nothing we can't knock out with some antibiotics. Rebecca hesitated. You don't think it could be something worse? His fever's been really high. He's lethargic. His heart rate feels fast. The PA gave a reassuring nod. We see this kind of thing all the time. Kids bounce back fast. I'll prescribe a broad-spectrum oral antibiotic and a fever reducer. Keep an eye on him. Lots of fluids, and if anything gets worse, you can head to the ER. She wanted to argue. Something in her gut said this was more than a bit of cellulitis. But Ethan was exhausted, and they were finally being discharged. Maybe she was just in nurse mode, catastrophizing. Maybe he was right. They went home. Ethan slept the entire afternoon. When she woke him for medicine, his hands were cold and clammy. He flinched at the touch of the spoon against his lips. Still, she coaxed the medicine down. By evening, his breathing had changed. It was shallower, faster, and every so often it would hitch, as if his lungs were catching on something. Rebecca checked his pulse, racing. His temperature? 104.1. Her hands began to shake. She called the after-hours nurse line. They told her to go to the emergency room. Now. By the time they reached the hospital, Ethan was too weak to walk. A triage nurse brought a wheelchair. Rebecca rattled off the symptoms like gunfire. Fever, fatigue, confusion, redness spreading, difficulty breathing. The nurse didn't hesitate. They were ushered back into a bay. Monitors were connected. Vitals were taken. Blood was drawn. Then the curtain opened, and in walked Dr. Julia Hawk. Rebecca had heard of her. Chief of Pediatric Emergency, one of the best. She was tall, composed, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun and eyes that scanned like radar. I'm Dr. Hawk, she said. Tell me everything. Rebecca did. As she spoke, Hawk moved with efficient grace, checking vitals, lifting Ethan's shirt to inspect his torso, pressing gently along his abdomen. He's hypotensive, she said to the nurse. BP is dropping. Get me a bolus of fluids and start him on O2. We need IV antibiotics now. Rebecca's heart began to race. What's happening? Dr. Hawk looked at her squarely. Your son is showing signs of sepsis, likely from a bacterial infection that entered through the skin. But they said it was just cellulitis. Hawk cut in, calm but firm. Sepsis can start that way. If it reaches the bloodstream, it becomes life-threatening. The body's immune response goes into overdrive and starts damaging its own tissues. We're going to do everything we can, but I want you to be prepared. Things may move fast. Rebecca's mouth went dry. She gripped Ethan's hand. It was too still, too cold. Within an hour, they were transferring him to the pediatric ICU. His heart rate was erratic. His oxygen levels dipped dangerously low. A second IV line was inserted. Machines surrounded him now. Monitors, infusion pumps, oxygen mask. In the elevator ride to the ICU, Rebecca stood beside the gurney, clutching the rails. Her mind kept replaying the past 48 hours. Every moment she had dismissed, every sign she had rationalized away. A pimple. A damn pimple. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. They reached the ICU, where a team of nurses took over. Dr. Hawk stayed, issuing orders, moving with calm urgency. Rebecca was guided to the glass observation area. Her legs felt numb, and then she saw Ethan, lying there, hooked to machines, motionless. A nurse gently offered her a seat. Rebecca lowered herself into it, her eyes never leaving her son. Hang on, baby, she whispered. Hang on. The pediatric ICU was quieter than the ER, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was clinical, tense, a silence filled with beeps, monitors, and the sound of people trying very hard not to panic. Ethan lay in the center of it all, dwarfed by the equipment surrounding him. A ventilator pumped shallow breaths into his lungs. 4 poles towered on either side of his bed, feeding him a cocktail of fluids, antibiotics, and medications meant to keep his blood pressure from plummeting. His face, once so expressive, was now pale and still. Dr. Julia Hawk stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded, eyes scanning the monitors. Heart rates holding at 136. BP still low, 88/50, one of the nurses called out. Push another bolus. And get the labs up here ASAP. I want the cultures rechecked. We're not waiting. Rebecca stood outside the glass, watching. Her hands were clenched into fists, pressed tightly against her chest. She'd been offered a chair, water, reassurance, but she refused all of it. Her eyes never left Ethan. Dr. Hawk finally stepped out of the room and approached her. His condition is critical, she said. We believe he's in full septic shock. The infection has entered his bloodstream. His body is responding by flooding his system with inflammatory chemicals. It's trying to fight, but it's causing more damage than the bacteria itself. Rebecca swallowed hard. But you can treat this, right? The antibiotics? They're running now. Hawk nodded. Broad spectrum, until we get a clear culture. We're also giving vasopressors to help keep his blood pressure stable. His organs are under strain. We're watching his kidney and liver function closely. His organs? Rebecca repeated, her voice cracking. When the body goes into septic shock, the heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver can all be affected. We caught it in time to intervene, but he's not out of the woods. Rebecca nodded, though she barely heard the words. Her eyes blurred. Dr. Hawk placed a hand on her shoulder. I know this is overwhelming, but I promise you he's getting everything we've got. Back inside the room, Ethan's breathing hitched. Alarms chirped. Nurses moved in with practiced calm, adjusting settings. The red line on his neck had faded into a wider zone of inflamed skin, his entire lower face swollen. His temperature hovered near 104. His fingers twitched, then went still. Later that evening, a critical care specialist, Dr. Lerman, joined the team. We're seeing signs of early multi-organ dysfunction, he said during the bedside conference. His lactate levels are high. Creatinine's rising. Platelet count dropping. What does that mean? Rebecca asked, trying to focus. His body's in crisis. The infection's forcing every system to compensate. The kidneys aren't filtering properly. Blood isn't clotting as it should. We need to prepare for possible dialysis if this worsens. Rebecca gripped the railing of the observation area so hard her knuckles turned white. Dr. Lerman continued. The sepsis most likely began from a common skin bacterium, Staph aureus. Once inside the bloodstream, it hijacks the vascular system. It causes blood vessels to dilate, blood pressure to crash. Inflammatory responses go haywire. It's like setting off a chain reaction where the body starts attacking itself. It was just a pimple, she whispered. I know, Hawk said quietly. Over the next 12 hours, Ethan's condition teetered between fragile stability and sudden dips. He was sedated, but his body twitched intermittently. His hands were cool, his extremities dusky. In the early morning hours, a nurse tapped Rebecca's arm. He's spiking again. Temperature's 105.1. Rebecca rushed to the bedside. His skin was flushed, his forehead damp with sweat. The ventilator hissed in and out. Ethan, she whispered. I'm here. His eyelids fluttered, barely. She reached out, touched his hand. You're going to be okay. You're so strong. For a brief moment his fingers curled around hers. Then he went still again. Dr. Hawk returned mid-morning with updated labs. We've identified the strain, she said. It's methicillin-sensitive staph. That's good news. It means the antibiotics we're using are likely effective. Rebecca exhaled, the first breath that didn't feel jagged in hours. But we're not in the clear. The next 24 hours are critical. His organs need time to recover. As the day passed, Rebecca remained beside the glass. Nurses brought her tea. A social worker stopped by. A chaplain offered to pray with her. She declined them all. She was watching her son fight for his life, and she couldn't afford to look away. That evening, a young nurse named Kira sat beside her during the shift change. I've seen kids like him pull through, she said softly. Even when it seems impossible. Rebecca didn't answer. She was thinking of a birthday party. Ethan's 6th. He had worn a pirate hat all day and made everyone call him Captain Ethan. That night, as she tucked him in, he had whispered, "Don't ever let me get lost, okay?" She had laughed. "I'd find you anywhere." Now she wasn't sure she could. She pressed her palm against the glass. "Come back to me, Captain Ethan." Inside, the machines beeped steadily, a rhythm of hope, or a countdown. Inside Ethan's body, a war was raging. It was silent, invisible, but ferocious. His bloodstream, once a superhighway of oxygen and nutrients, had become a battleground. Billions of microscopic soldiers, white blood cells, neutrophils, macrophages, raced through his veins, seeking out invaders. But they were overwhelmed. The enemy was small, simple, and lethal, Staphylococcus aureus. At first it had crept in quietly, through the tiny wound on his chin. A careless squeeze. A broken skin barrier. That was all it took. From the soft tissue, the bacteria found open capillaries, and within hours it had gone systemic. Now it was everywhere. The staph released toxins, tiny molecular weapons that shredded cell walls, disrupted signals, confused immune responses. The immune system fought back with everything it had, but in doing so, It unleashed chaos. The cytokines came first, chemical messengers screaming for help. They flooded Ethan's system, calling in more white blood cells, ordering blood vessels to dilate, telling organs to go into emergency mode. And they did. His heart began pumping faster, trying to keep up with the sudden drop in blood pressure caused by the widespread dilation. His lungs, swollen with inflammation, struggled to exchange oxygen. His kidneys, starved of blood flow, began to falter. Outside, doctors saw numbers. Inside, the war had no scoreboard, only damage. Neutrophils attacked anything that looked foreign, but in their confusion, they began damaging healthy tissues too. Capillaries leaked, swelling spread, oxygen couldn't reach certain areas, red blood cells clumped, tiny clots formed in small vessels, choking off circulation. The liver tried to filter out the wreckage but couldn't keep up. Toxins accumulated. The gut lining began to weaken, releasing bacteria into the bloodstream that weren't there before. It was a cascade, one misfire after another, a body turning on itself in desperation. And still, Ethan's brain fought to hold on. He drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between fever dreams and flickers of memory. He saw the backyard swaying gently in summer wind. He saw his mother's face, lit by birthday candles. He heard music, soft and distant, like it was playing underwater. He heard a voice too. Not his mother's, not the doctor's. A deep, calm voice. "You have to decide." "Decide what?" he whispered, though his lips didn't move. "To stay, or to go." His dreamscape twisted. The swing disappeared. He was in a fog now, standing in a hallway of his old school, but it was empty. No footsteps, no laughter, just the echo of his own heartbeat. Slowing, he reached for the wall, steadied himself. Somewhere far away, machines beeped. Back in the ICU, Rebecca sat beside his bed, watching those beeps with aching focus. Every number on the monitor had become her religion, praying that they would stay stable, or climb, or just stop falling. Dr. Hawk stood beside her. "He's in what we call a cytokine storm," she explained. "The immune system is trying so hard to eliminate the bacteria that it's damaging the body in the process. It's like setting fire to a house to kill a single rat." Rebecca nodded, though she barely understood. Can he hear us?" "Maybe," Hawk said. "It's hard to say, but talk to him anyway." So she did. She leaned in close, her lips near his ear. "I'm here, Ethan. I'm not leaving. You're not alone." His heart rate ticked up by a single beat. Inside, in the dream world, Ethan opened a door and stepped into light, but the light wasn't warm. It was cold, blinding, empty. He turned back. Rebecca sat in the hospital chapel, though she wasn't praying. The small, dimly lit room was empty except for the sound of the ventilation system humming overhead. She had come here after the third time in 6 hours that a nurse had asked if she wanted to rest, to eat, to take a break. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to rest. She wanted her son back. On the table in front of her sat a plastic bag the nurse had handed her earlier, containing Ethan's personal items, his backpack, his sweatshirt, a spiral notebook bent at the corners. She opened it absently, flipping through doodles, math notes, and grocery lists for a pretend zombie apocalypse. Halfway through, she found it, a page written in blue ink, uneven and messy. "Things I think about but don't say." Rebecca froze. She read, "Sometimes I feel invisible. Sometimes I wonder if Mom sees me or just manages me. Sometimes I think she loves me, but maybe she's too tired to show it. Sometimes I feel bad for thinking that. I know she's doing her best. But sometimes I wish I was small again so she'd hold me more." Her chest tightened. She read it again, and again. Each sentence was a wound, small but deep, a quiet echo of all the things she'd missed, all the moments she had dismissed as just growing pains. She had always told herself that Ethan was low maintenance, that he was independent, but maybe that wasn't true. Maybe he had just given up trying to be seen. She pressed the notebook to her chest and closed her eyes. A flood of memories came rushing in. Ethan as a toddler, running down the hallway in superhero pajamas, laughing so hard he hiccuped. Ethan, age 6, building a rocket ship out of cardboard and refusing to cut windows in it because real spaceships are sealed tight. Ethan last Halloween, standing awkwardly in a vampire cape, asking if he was too old to go trick-or-treating. And her answers, always rushed, always distracted, always tired. "I'm working late, sweetie." "Not now, honey. Mommy has a call. We'll do something this weekend, I promise. Of course I love you. Don't be silly." She had thought those words were enough. They weren't. Back upstairs, Ethan lay still under the fluorescent lights, lost in fever and sedation. Machines breathed for him. Monitors beeped a rhythm that no longer comforted her. She entered the ICU again, this time with the notebook clutched tightly in her hand. Dr. Hawk met her at the doorway. "He's stable for now," she said, "but he's still not out of danger. We're seeing signs of decreased kidney function. If it continues, we may need to start dialysis." Rebecca nodded. "I found something in his bag." She handed over the notebook and pointed to the page. Dr. Hawk read silently, then closed it. Her eyes, always steady, shimmered for a brief second. "He sounds like a very thoughtful boy," she said. "He's too thoughtful," Rebecca whispered. "He carries things he shouldn't have to. You're not a bad mother." Rebecca turned to her, eyes rimmed red. A good mother would have seen this coming. "No," Hawk said firmly. "Even good mothers miss things. And when they do, they fight like hell to fix them. That's what you're doing." But the words felt hollow, because somewhere deep inside, Rebecca still heard Ethan's question from just a few nights ago. If something bad happened to me, would you even notice? And now here they were. She sat beside his bed, held his hand gently and spoke. "I notice now, baby. I see everything now. I see how quiet you were when you needed noise. I see how polite you were when you needed to yell. I see how brave you were when you needed help." She stroked his hair. "I wasn't there the way you needed me to be, but I am here now. I will be here every second." His hand twitched in hers, barely, but it was enough. It happened just after 2 a.m. Rebecca had dozed off for only a moment, her forehead resting against the edge of the hospital bed. Ethan's hand still held tightly in hers. Then came the sound, not a scream, not a shout, just a single sharp alarm, flat, piercing, unmistakable. She jolted upright. The monitor was red. Nurses rushed in. "Code blue. Room 315. Rebecca was pushed back as the room filled in seconds. The overhead lights flicked on, and the soft hum of the night turned into organized chaos. "Pulseless," one nurse called out. "Initiating CPR." A male doctor in blue scrubs, Dr. Lerman, took over chest compressions, counting aloud. Each press into Ethan's fragile chest a reminder that his heart had stopped. Dr. Hawk appeared like a storm, controlled, focused, direct. Epinephrine, 1 milligram, charging defibrillator. Rebecca couldn't breathe. Her vision tunneled. The sound of the crash cart being wheeled in, the plastic clatter of gloves being snapped on, the rising pitch of the defibrillator charging. She pressed herself to the wall, arms wrapped around her chest. "No, no, 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 clear." Everyone stepped back. A burst of electricity surged through Ethan's chest, lifting his small frame from the bed. His body slammed back down with a thud. The monitor beeped, then flatlined again. "Still no rhythm," the nurse said, voice tight. Again. "Clear." Another shock. Rebecca slid to the floor, her legs no longer able to support her. "Please, God, please." 1 minute, 2, 3. The longest minutes of her life. Sinus rhythm returning, the nurse said. The flatline became blips. Faint, erratic, but there. The room exhaled. The team moved quickly, stabilizing, adjusting, documenting. Dr. Hawk turned to Rebecca, kneeling down beside her. "He's back. But just barely." He went into cardiac arrest, likely due to a combination of the sepsis, low oxygen, and systemic strain. Rebecca couldn't speak. She looked past the doctor, toward the bed where Ethan lay, pale, soaked in sweat, tubes everywhere, body still. He looked smaller than ever. The team cleared out slowly, one by one, until only a single nurse remained to monitor the machines. Dr. Hawk sat beside her on the floor. "We have a choice to make," she said quietly. "He needs more support. We can escalate treatment to ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. It will take over the function of his heart and lungs while we try to let his body rest and recover." "Will it save him?" Rebecca asked. "It might," Hawk said, "but there are risks. Bleeding, blood clots, complications. It's invasive, but it gives him a chance." Rebecca looked up at her son. His face was ghostly. His chest moved only because the machine told it to, and yet, he was still here. "Do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." Preparations began immediately. Specialists arrived. A surgeon was called in. Rebecca stood just outside the glass as they inserted cannulas into his neck and groin, connected the circuits, and powered on the ECMO machine, a bulky device that whirred to life with a deep, vibrating hum. Dark blood flowed from Ethan's body through the tubing, circulated through the oxygenator, and returned, bright red and full of life-giving oxygen. It looked violent, mechanical, terrifying. But it was saving him, and all Rebecca could do was watch. She stepped back into the room hours later. The chaos settled, the lighting dimmed again. She approached Ethan slowly, sat beside him, and placed her hand on his forehead. "You left for a second," she whispered, "but I'm not letting you go." She held the spiral notebook in her other hand and began reading it aloud, page after page, his drawings, his silly jokes, his wild ideas about time travel and alien worms and which dinosaur would make the best house pet. And when she got to the last page, the one he had titled Things I Want to Do Someday, her voice cracked. Build a robot, go to the ocean, ride a roller coaster, learn to skateboard without falling. Tell my mom I love her when she's not looking at her phone. She closed the notebook. Leaning close, she kissed his forehead gently. "I heard you," she said. "I'm looking now." Ethan stood in the fog. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm either. Just endless gray stretching in every direction. Soft, quiet, thick like cotton. He didn't remember walking there. He just was. The ground beneath his bare feet felt like smooth stone. The air was still, muffled, as if time itself had been turned down low. He turned slowly, searching for something, anything, but there were no walls, no ceiling, no sky. Just miss. "Hello?" he called out. His voice didn't echo. It simply vanished. Then a sound. Gentle footsteps, approaching from behind. Ethan spun around. A figure emerged from the mist. Tall, calm, familiar. "Grandpa?" Ethan whispered. The man smiled. Same smile, same eyes. "I was wondering when you'd find your way here," his grandfather said. Ethan stared. "But you're dead." The man chuckled, not unkindly. "That's one way to put it." Ethan's lip quivered. "Am I dead?" "Not yet." "Then what is this place?" The man looked around. "Some call it the in-between, others a waiting room. I like to think of it as a choice. A choice." The man walked forward, placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "You're at the edge, Ethan. Not quite gone, not quite here. But you don't have to stay." Ethan looked down at his own hands, pale but solid. "But I feel real." "You are," the man said, "and somewhere out there your body is fighting. Machines are breathing for you. People are hoping for you. But your soul came here to decide. To decide what? To go back, or to rest." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I'm tired, I know. It hurts. I know that too." The fog shifted around them, rippling like water. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw something. Colors, lights, a distant voice calling his name. He turned toward it. "I think that's Mom," he whispered. "It is," said his grandfather. "She's holding on." Ethan's voice shook. "Is she scared?" "Yes." "Is she mad at me?" "No. She's mad at herself. But she loves you more than anything." Ethan nodded. Silence again. Then he asked, "If I go back, will I wake up? Eventually. Will I be okay?" His grandfather hesitated. "You'll be different. You'll carry this moment, forever. But yes, you can live." Ethan took a deep breath, though there was no air. "And if I stay?" His grandfather's eyes softened. "Then you rest." Peacefully, and all the pain stops. Ethan looked down, then up. "I miss you," he said. "I miss you too, kiddo. I wish you could come back. I can't. But you can." Ethan turned toward the shimmer of light in the fog. He could hear voices now. Muffled, desperate, warm, like echoes from behind a thick wall. "I'm scared," he admitted. "That's how you know you're still alive." Ethan took a step toward the light, then another, and another. The fog began to thin. Behind him, the man's voice followed. "I'll be here, whenever you're ready. But not yet, okay?" Ethan didn't look back. He just kept walking, toward the voices, toward the warmth, toward the world that still needed him. The light in Ethan's ICU room had shifted. It was softer now, like dawn pushing gently against the sterile hum of machines. The ECMO machine still buzzed beside him, pumping his blood in and out like a mechanical heart. The ventilator hissed every few seconds, reminding everyone that his body still needed help doing even the most basic task, breathing. Rebecca sat in the same chair she had occupied for days, her body aching, hair unwashed, eyes rimmed with fatigue. But her hand was still wrapped around Ethan's, fingers laced like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. A nurse had come and gone, adjusting something in the IV line. A chaplain had stopped by earlier, offering quiet prayers. Rebecca had nodded but said nothing. She didn't need more prayers. She needed a miracle. On the tray table beside her sat Ethan's spiral notebook, creased, worn, and filled with the quiet confessions of a boy who had learned to live unnoticed. She opened it again. This time she didn't read in silence. She read aloud. Every line, every messy word. She wanted Ethan to hear her voice, to feel her presence through the fog. Sometimes I feel invisible. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. Sometimes I wonder if Mom sees me or just manages me. She stopped, wiped her eyes, and kept going. Sometimes I think she loves me, but maybe she's too tired to show it. Rebecca closed the notebook slowly and placed it on her lap. Baby, she whispered, leaning in close. I'm so sorry. No monitors beeped, no miraculous twitch, just silence. She held his hand tighter. I didn't mean to be tired. I didn't mean to miss the way your shoulders started to droop, the way your questions got quieter. I thought you were just growing up. I didn't realize you were growing lonely. The only response was the steady hiss of the ventilator. Rebecca sat back and looked at her son's face, pale, still, a trace of swelling around his jaw. The once red mark on his chin had faded, but it left behind something more permanent, proof of how something so small could unravel a world. She stood slowly, paced a few steps, then returned to the chair, and then she whispered the words she hadn't yet said aloud. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, and if you're tired, I'll understand. A tear rolled down her cheek. But if you have anything left to fight with, if there's even a tiny piece of you that wants to stay, I need you to know I'll never look away again. Not for a second. She reached up, brushing the hair from his forehead. I don't care if you come back broken. I don't care if you can't talk or walk or laugh the same way. I just want you back. And then, his fingers twitched. At first, she thought she imagined it. She stared, breath caught. Then it happened again. A slow, unmistakable squeeze. Rebecca's breath hitched. Ethan? The monitor beside her beeped. A soft change in rhythm, a subtle shift in the wave pattern. She leaned in. Ethan, baby, can you hear me? Another twitch, stronger this time. His fingers curled around hers, weak but deliberate. A nurse walked in just as Rebecca gasped. He moved, she said, almost afraid to believe it. He moved his hand. The nurse rushed to the bed, checked reflexes, pupils, vitals. Then called for Dr. Hawk. Within minutes, the room filled again, but this time there was no panic, only cautious hope. Dr. Hawk entered, her calm demeanor unwavering. Ethan, she said gently, leaning down beside the bed. If you can hear me, try to open your eyes. Silence. Then, a flutter. One eye opened halfway, the lid heavy, the motion slow, but it was there. Rebecca covered her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Hawk smiled. Hi there, buddy. You gave us a scare. Ethan blinked once. Do you know where you are? Hawk asked. A pause, then a faint nod. Rebecca stepped forward, tears spilling freely now. I'm here, sweetheart. I never left. Ethan's mouth moved slightly, but no sound came. His lips were dry, barely parted. He's too weak to talk, Hawk said. But that's normal. He's still on the ventilator. Let's not push him. This is a very good sign. Rebecca nodded, pressing her lips to the back of Ethan's hand. You came back, she whispered. You really came back. For the first time in days, her voice wasn't cracked by fear, but lifted by something else. Relief, gratitude, a love so fierce it made her knees weak. She sat back down, still holding his hand, and began humming softly, an old lullaby she used to sing when he was small. His eyelids fluttered again, but this time they stayed open a little longer. Outside the window, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Morning was coming. And for the first time in a long time, so was hope. The first time Ethan realized he couldn't speak, panic surged through him like fire. It was the following morning. The ventilator had been removed. The ECMO machine still hummed beside him, but his vitals were stable enough that the doctors allowed brief moments of wakefulness without sedation. He opened his eyes to the soft glow of morning and saw Rebecca sitting beside him, her hair pulled back into a messy braid, her face worn but radiant with relief. You're awake, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're really here. He tried to respond. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His lips parted, his throat contracted, but there was no sound, not even a rasp. He frowned, tried again, more forcefully this time, but still silence. His breath grew faster. His chest rose and fell too quickly. Monitors began to beep. Rebecca stood. Ethan? What's wrong? He shook his head and pointed at his throat. No voice? She guessed. He nodded once. Tears welled in his eyes. A nurse rushed in, followed by Dr. Hawk. They checked vitals, examined his throat, scanned his responses. Everything looks okay structurally, Hawk said gently. This is likely a temporary condition. The combination of the breathing tube, the infection, and the strain on your nervous system. It's not unusual for vocal cords to be affected. Ethan stared at her, wide-eyed. "Can you understand us?" she asked. He nodded. "Good. That's good. We'll monitor it closely. For now, I want you to rest, and if you need something, you can write it down." She handed him a notepad and a pen. Ethan took it with shaking hands, wrote slowly, "How long will this last?" Rebecca read the words and swallowed hard. "We don't know yet," Hawk said, "but you're strong. You've already survived the worst." Ethan looked away. Rebecca sat down beside him again, holding his hand. "It's okay," she said. "We'll figure this out together." But Ethan didn't look at her. He stared out the window, lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tight. That afternoon, he refused to write anything else. When the physical therapist came in to check his motor function, Ethan followed instructions, but silently. No smile, no acknowledgement. When the nurse asked if he wanted music or television, he turned his face to the wall. Rebecca tried not to take it personally, but inside, her heart ached. Later that evening, after the lights were dimmed, she sat beside him again and whispered, "You don't have to talk for me to hear you." He didn't react. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a pack of flashcards, the kind used to teach babies first words. "Do you remember these?" she asked, smiling. "You used to chew on them more than look at them." Still no reaction, but she set the cards on the table anyway. The next day, a different nurse entered the room, an older woman with kind eyes and quick hands. She introduced herself as Lila. "You're the quiet type, huh?" she said, winking at Ethan. "That's all right. Sometimes silence speaks louder." She moved through her tasks with practiced ease, adjusting tubing, checking IVs. Before she left, she turned to Rebecca. "You know," she said, "when my grandson couldn't talk after a stroke, he learned to sign." "Sign?" Rebecca asked. "Sign language," Lila nodded. "Took a while, but it helped, gave him power back. Might be worth a try." Rebecca looked at Ethan, who was watching quietly. That evening she pulled up a video on her phone, basic ASL, the alphabet. She didn't say anything, just pressed play. Then she began copying the signs, one letter at a time. A, B, C, D. Ethan watched. After a while he lifted one hand, slowly formed an E. Rebecca smiled. "You remember this?" He nodded faintly. She handed him a sheet of paper with the ASL alphabet printed on it. "We'll learn together," she said. For the first time since he'd woken up, Ethan smiled. Small, but real. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Mr. Ray knocked on the hospital door. He stood there with his usual baseball cap, flannel jacket, and the soft gaze of a man who had seen more than he spoke. Rebecca blinked, surprised to see him. "Mr. Ray?" she asked, rising from the chair. He smiled gently and stepped into the room, holding up a small notebook with a note scribbled in block letters. "Heard about Ethan. Thought I could help." Ethan looked up from the bed, curious. Rebecca moved aside as Mr. Ray walked closer, stopping just beside the heart monitor. He raised one hand, slowly, and formed a simple shape. "Hi," in American Sign Language. Ethan's eyes widened. Rebecca glanced at her son, then back at the old man. "You know Essel?" Mr. Ray nodded, then pointed to his ears, then his mouth. Rebecca remembered, vaguely, that he was hard of hearing, maybe more than she realized. She looked at Ethan. Ethan hesitated, then shyly raised one hand and signed back, "Hi." A smile broke across Mr. Ray's weathered face like morning sunlight. He sat in the chair across from Ethan and pulled a tiny whiteboard from his bag. On it he wrote, "I was born deaf. Learned to sign at 5. I can teach you." Ethan read the words, then looked up and nodded. For the next 30 minutes, the room filled with the movement of hands instead of voices. Mr. Ray taught him the signs for yes, no, thank you, mom, scared, strong, okay. Rebecca watched, tears filling her eyes. It was beautiful. It was language being rebuilt. It was love finding a new way through the silence. Later that night, Rebecca sat beside Ethan with her laptop, replaying the ASL alphabet video, repeating each letter, matching his fingers with hers. "A," she said aloud. "Like apple." Ethan formed the sign. "B, like brave." Ethan gave her a small look. She nodded. "You are, you know, brave." He lifted his hands and signed, "So are you." She laughed through her tears. "I'm just the mom. It's my job." He shook his head. "You stayed." That night they didn't say much more. They didn't need to, because between them, the silence had become sacred. It held their regret, yes, but also their forgiveness. And more than anything, it held the promise of beginning again. The next morning Mr. Ray returned. He brought a deck of ASL flashcards and a chocolate bar with a sticky note that read, "For the best student I've had in years." Ethan grinned and offered a thumbs up. When Rebecca stepped into the hallway to take a call from Dr. Hawk, Mr. Ray pulled out another whiteboard note. "You're stronger than you know. Keep going." Ethan didn't sign anything in return. He simply reached over and squeezed the man's hand, and in that small gesture, a conversation was finished. 6 weeks later, Ethan Parker walked through the front gates of his school, backpack over one shoulder, a soft knit beanie pulled over his newly growing hair. He was thinner now, a little slower when he moved, and still silent. But his eyes, those steady brown eyes, had the look of someone who had lived through something most people never would. The hallway chatter paused when he passed. A few kids whispered. One boy, Jake, approached awkwardly at lunch and slid into the seat across from him. "I heard you were really sick." Ethan nodded. Jake shifted. "People were saying, like it was just a zit. That's wild." Ethan gave a half smile, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small whiteboard with a marker clipped to the side. He scribbled something and turned it around. "Small things can be dangerous too." Jake read it, blinked, then looked up. "Yeah, I guess so." There was silence between them for a moment. Then Jake added, "I'm glad you're back, man." Ethan signed, "Me too." That evening, at home, Rebecca was setting the table when Ethan walked into the kitchen and held up a folded piece of paper. She took it with curiosity, unfolded it, and found a drawing, a simple cartoon version of the two of them, her sitting at his hospital bedside, him smiling up at her. Underneath, he had written in careful block letters, "I saw you, even when I couldn't open my eyes." Her chest tightened. She looked up and saw Ethan watching her, fingers twitching, unsure. She crossed the room and hugged him. "I saw you too," she whispered, "and I always will." After dinner, they sat on the porch swing together, something they hadn't done in years. The sun was setting over the neighborhood, casting golden light on the trees, the roofs, the sidewalks. Rebecca looked out at it all and then turned to her son. "You want to talk about it?" Ethan hesitated, then picked up his whiteboard again. "Sometimes I remember the fog." She waited. He wrote again. It was quiet there, and safe. She swallowed. "Did you want to stay?" A pause, at first. "But then I remembered your voice." She blinked rapidly. "You said you saw me, that I wasn't invisible." Rebecca reached over, resting her hand on his. "I meant it." Later that week, Ethan wrote a short entry for his class journal assignment. With the teacher's permission, Rebecca read it aloud. "Everyone thinks it was just a pimple, but it was more than that. It was a test, for my body, my family, my heart. And I think I passed. My mom says little things matter, and I think she's right, because sometimes a little thing wakes you up. Sometimes it changes everything." That night, after Ethan went to bed, Rebecca stood alone in the kitchen, looking at the spiral notebook he'd left on the counter, the same one from the hospital. She turned to the last page. There, written in new handwriting, steadier now, was a single sentence: "Nothing is ever just a small thing." Rebecca closed the notebook and smiled. No, she thought, not anymore. Sometimes it's the smallest things, the ones we overlook, ignore, or brush aside, that end up changing everything. A simple pimple, a single moment, a quiet boy who just wanted to be seen. But in the stillness between life and death, Ethan reminded us of something we too often forget. Nothing is ever just a small thing, not a word left unsaid, not a tear unnoticed, not a hand held in silence. So tonight, ask yourself, what small thing in your life might really be a big thing? Who do you need to look at more closely? What have you been ignoring that maybe you shouldn't? We'd love to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more real stories that touch the heart, and help us bring light to the things that matter most. We see you, and we're glad you're here.